This is Blacklisted Radio. It's the 29th day of March, 2014. My name is Doug Owen. It's good to be with you on this live Saturday morning edition of the show. You can follow along at blacklistedradio.com. We have an interactive chat room there, and we always do this live Saturday morning, so you can join us. You can also follow me on Twitter at BLN Radio. That's BLN Radio. We always stream the show via Twitter and Roku, iTunes, of course, the Spreaker channel. Spreaker.com/Blacklisted News. All right, so there's a lot of things I definitely want to cover today. I saw some oddball stories that make a lot of sense. And one of the things I've always been a big or a bit critical of is time change, daylight savings. You always wonder, is anything really being saved? This is kind of the half-cocked scheme that governments play on people. And it sounds great. Yeah, we're saving energy. People are doing less work in the dark. And I've heard all of these different amalgamations of why we actually do this. Now, some states do absolve. I think Arizona and Idaho are two of the states that do not do it, which makes it even more complex. I saw this just 27 minutes ago, and from Yahoo, Reuters to your ears, daylight savings time linked to heart attacks. Study proves. Did you think that people were dying because of daylight savings time? Next time you hear somebody that's critical, say, by the way, did you know that people die because of this stuff? I feel like I'm going to die when I have to get up 2 hours early to try to get ahead of, not that I have to wake up more than an hour earlier, but just to kind of get in the swing of things. It's hard. So I always have to go 2 hours ahead or 2 hours back. Switching over to daylight savings time, according to Reuters, and losing 1 hour of sleep raised the risk of having a heart attack the following Monday by 25%. 25%! Okay, you're a quarter more likely to die the next Monday morning. I feel like death. So this makes a lot of sense. Sometimes, you have that human intuition. This has to be killing people. And lo and behold, it actually is. By contrast, heart attack risk fell 21% later in the year on the Tuesday after the clock was returned to standard time and people got an extra hour of sleep. You got to wonder how many of those people are like, oh, frack, I lost my job. I'm getting fired. I'm getting written up. I'm going to have to go to human resources. Well, anyway, one more reason that we don't need daylight savings time. I know I just wanted to start the show with something that grinds my gears, and I've been suspicious of daylight savings time for quite some time now, and this proves a lot to me. All right, so that's a great way to start the show. I want to talk about media. We have a new media shield law that's being proposed by Chucky Schumer. You may be familiar with Chuck. He puts forward a lot of bad laws. I'm not a big fan of Chucky, and I find him to be one of these old cartel guys that just sticks around. People keep voting him back in, and you have to wonder why. Anyway, he's a big proponent of NSA spying. He's one of Dianne Feinstein's favorite people, and he basically admitted more or less that his media shield law won't actually protect journalists. Now, many of you out there that are fans of the alternative media know that people like myself will not be protected by the media shield law. If anything, this defines what media is. Now, we have the First Amendment right to free speech, okay? And that should be about all of the law that you need. Rather than conflating and making things more complex, we need to get rid of more laws that further divide what it is to be a journalist. Am I a journalist? I don't know. I woke up this morning to talk about news. Does that make me a journalist? Do I do my own research? Yes. Will I be protected by some shield law? No. And the clarification of who's a journalist and who is not going to help anyone. Because we know that the journalists themselves, if you're part of the media shield law and you get your government license or however this plays out, the government is going to be watching you. They're going to be watching you 24/7. They already are. And the, I guess, misnomer that some kind of law was going to protect journalists is, number one, laughable. Number two, you have to be kind of dumb to think that this is going to help journalists. And the journalists out there that are proponents, you are being played. You are not that bright. Anyway, coming from Tech Dirt, there had been a time when we thought that a little media shield law was a good idea. Yeah, you need to put those bad politicians in their places and keep them at bay, keep them from basically disassembling what free speech and free media we have in this country. It seems like a good idea, right? Such a law would make it explicit that journalists don't have to give up their sources, right? I mean, we've already heard about that, always heard about the Hippocratic Oath. You know, the sources are above government scrutiny. However, over the many years of debate concerning such a law, we noticed a troubling pattern in that politicians kept wanting to narrowly limit who was a journalist, often saying amateur journalists don't count, i.e. me, i.e. you. You're a journalist. You write something on your blog. That's journalism. I went to journalism school. I took classes in college and in high school on journalism. I went to English class. So what makes me not a journalist and somebody else a journalist? Because you work for The Guardian, because you work for some government-sponsored outlet, maybe the BBC. Anyway, Senator Lindsey Graham even explicitly stated that he wasn't sure if bloggers deserve First Amendment protections. Because, we live in a society where only certain people get to use the Constitution when it's convenient for them. You and I, maybe not. A completely out-of-touch Senator Dianne Feinstein insisted that, quote, real journalists draw salaries from big media companies. When WikiLeaks first became a big deal, those working on the legislation actually worked hard to make sure that WikiLeaks would not be covered. And here's the deal. WikiLeaks is not a journalist. It doesn't matter. They're not conducting journalism. It was just a big data dump of information and leaked emails and other nefarious bad actors putting their crimes on paper, on digital media, or in the digital world, the U.S. government and the military, their shenanigans and war crimes. And that was dumped to journalists and put out there for people, including yourselves, to be able to rifle through and create your own media. And, I mean, there's still just tons and tons of really, really big stories that haven't had the light of day that are still in the WikiLeaks catalogs. I mean, there's a lot of those emails from Stratfor that have highlighted everything from the U.S. assassination plots for Senor Chapo, the drug cartel leader. That's right. Interpol and ICE and the U.S. government were planning on assassinating this gentleman. I mean, just one of many, many huge stories that didn't really get the light of day. Why? Not because they don't have the information, but because journalists that work for big media outlets realize that that is just too damn dangerous to talk about. So, are they journalists? No. But does everyone have the right to the First Amendment? Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway, so even Schumer is saying that, real journalists, and this is where the rub is, driving home his point last week, Chucky Schumer himself admitted that he's not sure if his own law, and this is pretty typical, somebody writing a law or signing a law that has not been written by themselves, and they don't really understand how their own law works. I mean, that in and of itself seems to be a crime. I mean, I could only imagine what would happen if, at my job, I did something that was so critical that it affected everyone, and I really had no idea why I did it. Doug, why did you take this server down? Nobody could get any work done. There was no productivity on Friday at all. Okay, we've lost tens of hundreds of hours of work. What happened? I did this thing, and I didn't really know, and I mean, good luck with that. Only in government can you get away with something that dire, that affects so many people, and not be reprimanded. Oh, and if you want very little accountability, you might be aiming for a job in government. Anyway, Schumer discussed the bill's provisions and how if the law became real, it might affect journalist Glenn Greenwald, who reported on National Security Agency's secret surveillance based on documents leaked by Edward Snowden. Quote, it's probably not enough protections to cover him, but it's better than the current law, Schumer said. You don't need a law. Laws just redefine things that I think are pretty self-evident. Who's a journalist? What is journalism? It's a great question in this day and age. Speaking of journalists or people that may be covered under the journalistic law, and I don't want to beat the drum too much because we don't know where this will fall. I hope it falls flat on its face, but people might go through with it. CNN, they decided to go with a foreigner that was implicated in a huge hacking phone scandal, and I'm surprised hasn't been extradited for his part in a vast conspiracy of crime and illegal hacking. As much as the government talks about cybersecurity and all of those things that are of utmost importance, Mr. Piers Morgan gets a pass on all of that. Anyway, apparently, I've watched clips of his show. I've never actually watched the show. I've heard that he does a show on CNN. I don't have CNN on my TV, nor would I pay for it, nor do I care. I mean, I can get most of their stuff from the internet if I wanted. And very rarely have I been that interested in what Piers Morgan is saying. He's just another talking head. And in my opinion, just my opinion, he's not a journalist. Okay? Journalists actually do things like journalism. They actually write stories. They get a scoop and they go vet it. They bring us information that we didn't have before. That's kind of journalism, in my mind anyway. If you just read news in front of a camera, you are a presenter. Okay, there's a difference in my mind between a journalist and a presenter. Now, I don't think that you have any more rights because you're a journalist or a presenter, but that's really what he is. So anyway, this comes from Deadline. Piers Morgan wrapped up his 3-year CNN run last night, I guess that was, on the 28th. A full hour of discussion was had about the missing plane, of course. You got to talk about Flight 370 ad nauseum. But this 4-minute final remarks, in the 4 minutes, he couldn't resist taking part shots at the NRA. Quote, I assumed that after 70 people were shot in a movie theater and then just a few months later, 20 first graders were murdered in an assault with an assault rifle in an elementary school, the absurd gun laws in this country would change, end quote, he said, but nothing has happened. The gun lobby in America, led by the NRA, has bullied, I love the term, this nation's politicians into cowardly, supine silence. And there's a little truth to that, because people that do want political power and want to stay in political power, especially in southern states, are not going to razzle rifle's a good word, razzle the people and talk about gun laws too much. I mean, if you look at the nullification of gun laws, Idaho is pushing forward, trying to disable or dismantle all of the federal regulation over gun laws. There's plenty of, I think, blowback, because ultimately people understand that even if you are not a fan of guns and you believe that we need less guns in this world and that guns in the wrong hands are very dangerous and they kill people, and we all agree with all of those common sense notions. They're not just notions. I mean, it's the reality on the ground. Yeah, you know, people do bad things with guns. Cops, they do a lot of bad things with guns. They extort people. I've got plenty of stories on blacklistednews.com for you if you wonder how a power and authority can be wielded with a badge, a shiny little badge, and a gun. You can see that there, glowing evidence of why guns are very, very dangerous. There's no doubt about it. They're very dangerous, but people like Piers Morgan like to negate that fact and say, well, you know, all of these people, you included, I included, we need heavier scrutiny. Now, he himself is a fan of guns, despite what he may tell you. He loves guns. He thinks guns are absolutely necessary to protect himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have private bodyguards with guns. It's pretty simple. Same thing for Dianne Feinstein, Chucky Schumer, all these people that tell you that you don't need guns. They themselves have guns, and, well, they'll tell you that it's a necessary evil. We have to have guns to protect ourselves because there's crazy people with guns. I think that that's partly true. think that is the reality of the day. There are probably a lot of people that hate them and want to kill them. I think that's probably very true, because people feel that these people are not representing them, and they are doing everything they can to take away their rights. And many of them, including myself, are offended by Chucky Schumer's comments and Piers Morgan's comments. I would never bother with shooting somebody because they're dumb. That's what we have with Piers Morgan when they are pushing an agenda, when they're a propagandistic piece of crap. Shooting Piers Morgan wouldn't change the world. Taking guns out of my hand wouldn't change the world. Taking guns out of most of the listeners of this podcast hands wouldn't change the crime that we see in this country. And better yet, it doesn't make any logical sense that somebody should have a gun and you shouldn't. Then it becomes the government's responsibility to figure out who should and who shouldn't have guns. I mean, I'm far more hardcore when it comes to gun laws. I believe that felons have a right to a gun. I don't see anything in the Constitution that says at some point you don't get to have a gun anymore. Because, and I think the gun extends to really beyond firearms, the ability to protect yourself. You have the right to protect yourself and property. That extends to machetes, knives, flamethrowers, grenades. Do you need a grenade? Probably not, but I think that you have a right to them. Why does the U.S. military get to be the arbiter of who gets blown up with a grenade and when it's moral and ethical and Christian-like? Well, I don't think they do. So anyway, I could rail on about Mr. Piers Morgan day in and day out. Ultimately, the reason that his show, I don't know, some people are like, oh, well, see, that's why he lost his show. See, it's because he's talking about guns, and people hate him for that, and he's admitted now that it's because of his gun rants that he's gone. He ran 3 years at CNN. I mean, if that's not a successful run in almost any kind of media endeavor, then I don't know what is. So I don't think that it's a failure and that he's being run off. I mean, if you run 3 years at CNN with the kind of numbers that he has, I mean, I would say that is a huge success. Huge success. All right, so enough with Piers Morgan and your right to have guns. All of us agree that there's a lot of people that probably shouldn't have guns, and they do, and there's a lot of people that should be able to have guns, and they don't, and, the government's not going to be the best arbiter of who that is or who gets to have what. They're not a good decider in that regard. So I wanted to mention a few of these other people out there, hypocrites in government, others that have popped up in the headlines, including one state senator from California who's accused of wire fraud. California state senator was lauded for his efforts to make government more transparent and authored gun control legislation, was arrested Wednesday accused of conspiracy. Yes, there are conspiracies to deal firearms and wire fraud. Senator Leland Yee was outlined in an FBI affidavit in support of criminal complaints against him and 25 other people. This guy actually has kind of brought forward this huge issue of underground gangs that are in charge of the U.S. State Senate. I think it's kind of laughable, really. I mean, this guy, you find these people all the time that are beating some drum. Oh, guns are horrible. We need to push forward with hardcore laws, and only certain people should be able to have guns. And lo and behold, this guy sold a undercover agent weapons worth $500,000 to $2.5 million. Always inflated numbers with any kind of contraband with government, but a lot of equipment. Okay, so not just guns. Okay, you say, well, this guy, he's a gun dealer. No, we're talking about missiles, okay? Shoulder-launched missiles. He had grenade launchers, and he was selling them to a Muslim separatist group in the Philippines to bring them back to the U.S., according to the affidavit by the FBI agent Emmanuel Pascual. So whether he was or not, or if this is just a huge indictment of Mr. Yee, Leland Yee, and this is all being set up as a way to crush him, I don't know. But it also highlights how we have this complete disconnect, and that criminals are in the government. The most dangerous and most egregious crimes are committed with the shield of government. And this isn't this isn't a congressman. Okay, this is a senator. He's a big deal. Anyway, he tried to be the mayor, didn't work out there in San Francisco. Anyway, I'm just reading this story over and over again. It kind of blows me away. I think that he's connected, or they're trying to make connections to the Triad, the Chinese gang. Anyway, this guy had an autobiography that was published about him in the 1980s. Legend, according to this one guy, Chow, he was running prostitution rings. He smuggled drugs and extorted thousands from business owners in Chinatown. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You find out that this guy couldn't be any worse. International drug dealer, gun runner, missile seller, working with terrorist groups. I think there might be a bigger story here, that he might have been, working covertly underground, trying to get the skinny or to compromise some of these other groups. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot more to it, but on its face, it shows you who you have to be kind of wary of. I've met a lot of people in my life. I've met a lot of shady characters. I've never met anyone that was this level of criminal, and you're not going to find too many of them that aren't somehow engendered by government. All right, so there's one of them. There's another assemblyman, Bill Scarborough, this week. A lot of people getting raided. A lot of government people getting chastised. The New York Observer had this one. Federal agents today raided the Albany and city offices of Queens Democratic Assemblyman Bill Scarborough. The FBI confirmed this afternoon, quote, the FBI conducted searches today of the Albany and New York City offices of New York State Assemblyman William Scarborough, end quote. FBI Albany spokesperson Paul Holstein said in a statement, quote, at this time, no further information is being released. So we don't know a lot about what happened, but apparently there's evidence that he carried out some kind of white crime, stealing money, wire fraud, something to that extent. I haven't really followed up on it, but another one of these assemblymen that are being targeted. So I always wonder if there's more to the story, and usually there is, and why these people are being targeted specifically, what they really did. Because at every turn, you find many of these people are criminals, and that they are able to operate their crime rings for year after year after year after year. Chucky Schumer's a fine example. Barney Frank, another fine example. He's actually out, but I'll just throw one out there to you. Barney Frank had a 15-year-old naked boy tied up in his closet, and his roommate was selling weed. Okay, he's a drug dealer. Now, if anything like that happened at my house, my God, it'd be national news. It'd be a huge deal. I would lose my house. I'd probably lose everything that I owned, and the government would be relentless when it came to prosecuting me. So certain politicians are allowed to do just about anything that they want to if they're high enough in the power chain. But some people get tracked down. All right, so let's see. There we go. A little bit of here we go. Here's the one from Vice that is about Yi. I wanted to bring it back to it. I was trying to find the article here. State senator's arrest reveals alleged ties to Chinese gangster underground society. With all of the metadata, with all of the surveillance that is, trillion-dollar surveillance that we now have. I know trillion is the new billion, but a lot of money goes into surveilling and to try to create networks or to break networks of crime. And that Mr. Yi could go on year after year after year working with the Triad. Seems kind of crazy that could even happen. Doesn't even seem real, man. California's Democratic Party party appears to have been infiltrated by a state senator with supposed ties to Chinese triad. Now, I love this. Vice has become so compromised and so left-leaning. It's really almost now, other than the independent journalists, and there's many of which that do work for Vice, but the overarching mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, I think partly in part because of the influence by Bill Maher and many others that now own, including Roger Ailes, that believe that, and Rupert Murdoch, that believe that Vice is the next level. So I think it's important to kind of highlight how they are already compromised, and that any kind of corporate-sponsored media is always going to tote some type of agenda. That's why it's important to support this show, along with many others that are completely independent, that require only the support of listeners like yourself. No corporate sponsors. No Vitality drips that you can get from the other guy. We've got Vitality drips. We've got new drops that are going to make you super hard. Okay, you see where I'm going here. When you have people that are toting some agenda, no matter how inconsequential it may be, they're still toting an agenda. Vice has pretty much sold out, and now they're just wearing their politics on their sleeves. And you just have to watch some of the new commentary, the new videos. And it's really sad to me because I really, really enjoyed the Vice coverage of many other topics. But c'est la vie, that's what happens to most things that are awesome. They get compromised. Once you get a bunch of people that are financially obligated to pay salaries and build a media empire, and you start getting some traction, next thing you know, Roger Ailes is there with a couple $1 million. Rupert Murdoch's really interested and wants to have a private meeting with you. You have handlers. All right, so enough about that. Vice breaks this story. The FBI's stunning arrest of State Senator Leland Yee at his San Francisco home in the raid at dawn was followed by the release of a massive 137-page affidavit. It names 26 defendants and outlines a sophisticated 5-year investigation into a Chinese secret society called the Chi Kung Tong, CKT, and its alleged crimes. So this is a 5-year study or investigation. The results of the investigation include dozens of charges leveled against well-known gangsters such as Raymond Shrimp Boy Chow, who is Chi Kung Tong's dragonhead or leader, as well as the exposure of political corruption in Senator Yee's office that is said to have been going on for years. The affidavit reads like a screenplay with an outrageous cast of characters that would be at home in a mob movie, including power-hungry politicians and flamboyant gangsters. Take Shrimp Boy, for example, a name given to Chow by his grandmother on the account of his height. For example, a self-proclaimed gangster, Chow originally immigrated from China and almost immediately fell into a life of crime. Quote, that's why, first thing, I go back to where I come from, the gang. He remarked in 2007. So anyway, once the gangster, always a gangster. I find it pretty sad that whoever was running against him in the state senate for the last few years hasn't figured out that this guy is a Chinese gangster, and why that never came into the equation when they were talking or running against him. I mean, that would be a great talking point. By the way, my rival here is a Chinese gangster. Anyway, we'll see more of this. It's going to be a big story that, I think it, at its base, further highlights the massive amount of corruption that you'll find throughout the Senate. And, when it comes to sanctioned criminality, Feinstein's husband's criminality, the neocons' criminality, the war crimes that are committed by many senators, not so much. Anyway, I think a lot of this also is basically being used as a way to demonize China, who is supporting now Russia. So anyway, I get home yesterday and I listened to Barack Obama, who made, and I'm not going to play the clip, but he made one of the most eloquent points, period, talking after he was with the new pope, the most rambunctious and I think outspoken pope or one of the latest incarnations of popeism that you're going to find. He's the rebel. Not that he hasn't been completely complicit in hiding the sexual pedophile rings that are well known now, or part of almost the public domain, and have become synonymous with the Catholic Church, raping children. He hasn't said a lot about that, and he's continued to keep all of those secret dossiers and documents and, let's be honest, evidence away from The Hague, Interpol, and the international community. So there you go. For all of the people that love hearing him talk crap about the U.S. economy and talking about debt slavery, because it sounds great. We like those talking points because we use them ourselves, and we highlight, I say that collectively, but we try to highlight the criminality to friends and family to kind of show them, hey, look, these people are not legitimate. When it comes to the Pope, I mean, he really is, he's immune. He's immune. The Vatican Bank has been under a lot of attack, so is the Papal See, but not so much that Barack Obama doesn't feel that he's obligated to go talk to a bunch of molesters. Anyway, he said, and he was questioned about Vladimir Putin's intentions, the Eastern Ukrainians. There's a lot of debate, or East Ukraine, and the debate whether Russia will enter the eastern portion of Ukraine and move forward post annexation of Crimea. I don't think he is. I don't think he would want to. I don't think that you'd really want to occupy most of Ukraine because, I mean, it's an economic hellhole. It's something that they were already in the process of trying to bail out. Now, the IMF, they've got a solution. It's called screwing the people over and austerity, to basically breaking the backs of the Ukrainian people. So all of those people that are crying and demanding integration into the EU, you're going to like it. Look to Greece. Look to even Germany, the people getting screwed there, having to pick up the tab for everything and all the criminality that's happening in Italy, Spain, all of the other broken, economically defunct countries that are supported through this EU interdependence. You see where it's going. I mean, if you think that you're going to be any more viable to compete in the EU than Greece, you'll see. Now, they've already come up with new conscription. They're going to... It's not funny. It's just, it shows you how, I mean, at this point, they don't even try to dress this pig. They don't put lipstick on it. They just basically say, look, you're going to pay double for gas next year. Okay, in the next few months, as part of the IMF deal to bail out your broke-ass country. And a reminder to all of our U.S. listeners, you're paying for this. Okay, we have the dilapidation and the degradation of our own infrastructure to the point where we're bordering on second-tier world here. We're becoming second-class citizens in the United States of America, and the divide is becoming larger and larger and larger. The Ukrainian people, all of those that are proponents of this gangster, thuggish new government, are going to get a little taste of what it means to be European and being screwed. Now, before we even have any elections, the elections don't even matter, okay, because they've already put together these IMF deals. The biggest, most egregious of the, what would you call, obligations for the Ukrainian government and the people is already being decided now. They're already paying the price. Now, they're not going to wait for the elected government to decide whether they want to take IMF money. Everybody's talking about whether or not the last criminal government leader, the president, Yanukovych, stole billions of dollars from the central bank, which I don't understand how that could even happen. I mean, how are you going to appropriate that and where that money is? And the lack of, I think, any claims being levied that this money has shown up somewhere else, or that it went to Russia, or it went through, Cyprus banks to turn into bitcoins, or wherever he may have stashed his money. The fact that there has been no follow-up on this claim that he has stolen all this money makes me think initially that it's complete BS. But they're going to raise the gas prices by 50%. This is going to bankrupt the people primarily, and the hope is that we can frack the shit out of the United States to the point where we can ship all of this heavily leveraged gas to the Ukrainian people, and more importantly, they don't even care about the Ukrainian people, to Europe. That's really where it all comes together, the ability and the independence of Europe. Russia has had that pole position holding gas exports over the European Union's head for years and years and years. It's a big problem for them because they're basically obligated to work with Vladimir Putin, Gazprom, Rosneft, and all these companies that run the pipelines. So this is a pretty half-cocked and stupid plan to try to bring some separation for this new European country. So when we go back to whether there are 50,000 or 100,000 people, Russian troops lined up at the borders. Now, the Pentagon, they put out a report Friday saying there is no proof. I don't trust the Pentagon because they didn't realize that Russia was going to go into Crimea, wink, wink. But they're saying there's no proof that this is going to happen, and there's no proof that these soldiers are here. Take them at their word, if you will. Now, the Ukrainians are saying that there's a huge amount of people, troops, coming to the border. Upwards of thousands of troops that are ready to invade at any moment, keeping this hypertension going. And, I think it's a bunch of BS. I can't see why Vladimir Putin would want to invade all of Ukraine or occupy Ukraine, because really you're just going to be occupying and taking on more debt. They're already in debt. What do you want? You want to pay loans to the IMF? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So, Obama was talking about it, and they're bringing Syria back into the equation. We're going to move back more into what's happening in Syria. The estimates of dead people have now reached 140,000, according to NBC News that I was watching yesterday. And point blank, the spokeshole asked Barack Obama, after seeing all the dead children, they're just showing you this B-roll of dead kids, and who knows how much of this is actually from Syria and how much of this is actually, the cannon fodder from U.S. bombs in Iraq. Because that's happened over and over again. We've seen all these fake photos that are B-roll. And B-roll, for all of you out there, that just means that it's stock footage. CNN has tons and tons and tons of stock footage of just stuff happening. Dead people, at parties. And, you go back to the justification for the Iraq war. It's showing the Palestinians jumping up for joy that the towers had been hit by bin Laden's cronies out of Saudi Arabia. Lo and behold, complete propaganda. Was not Palestinians celebrating the blowing up of 2 trade towers at the time. This is before 7 had fallen, and when they were showing this footage. That's not what they were celebrating. They were at a wedding party, which is very dangerous to be at these days in the Middle East. Wedding parties get blown up often. Anyway, point being is they had this B-roll footage that they showed everybody to use as propaganda to justify foreign intervention, to justify occupying and the ultimate killing of upwards of over 1 million Iraqis. So we talk about death tolls and we talk about all of the people that are suffering, and, well, I think it pales in comparison to what the U.S. has done, that the U.S. should take credit for, and the EU, the West, really altogether have cumulatively done in the Middle East. So, not that these lives aren't precious and independent, but let's not pretend that Bashar al-Assad is any worse than other rights violators and war criminals and murderers. There's plenty of them out there, and it seems that only when they want to selectively go after somebody strategically, and we know that what's happening in Syria is a proxy war against Iran and a proxy war against Russia. So the spokeshole asked Barack Obama, why do you regret not going into Syria? And he actually said something that made lots and lots of sense. He said, well, we didn't see any solution here that a military solution, and basically a paraphrase, but there's no strategic targets that you could hit with a missile that would change what's happening on the ground. And after 10 years of war, the American people, the political will is just not there. Now, this is something that is being repeated over and over again. I find it to be kind of a new meme, and that is that we're just too tired. We're just too tired for all of this war. So who have they brought out? Well, you know her. They brought out Condoleezza Rice. Now, people forget. People have short-term memory, and she is being hailed as this genius. They've now let her have... She's breaking barriers between the sex barriers. She now is a golf club member at Augusta. For all of you non-golf fans, they used to have a men-only club there. There's only 2 women that are allowed to golf at Augusta, 2 members, and one of them is Condoleezza Rice. She's also been given a new position, a very important position, one that most of the plebeians and mullets in the United States probably deem to be more important than the Treasury Secretary, the head of the Pentagon, and that is on the NCAA board. So when it comes to the tourney, when it comes to your brackets, Condoleezza Rice gets a say. And oh my God, I've been listening to sports talk radio, and I've been listening to a lot of political pundits, and man, she has been absolved of all of the crimes that she helped commit, all of the lies that she helped facilitate that led us into an unjust, illegal occupation of Iraq. People have forgotten. She is being touted as this gem, another Brookings Institute whore. Oh, it drives me insane. And she's a neocon, and she's pushing for war. People are like, we should take Condoleezza Rice. They've totally separated her from her butt buddy, George W. Bush. And I don't know. I think it's well worth pointing out that she is now becoming this hero of and champion of human rights, and she is going to be center stage. She is getting a lot of airtime. So watch out for Condi. Keep up with what she's doing. She was on the circuit, and she'll probably be talking tomorrow on the Sunday shows about war, the necessity of it, Russia. So every once in a while, they bring out these old characters. Donald Rumsfeld, Hillary Clinton, a lot of these people that are complete neoconservatives that have so much blood on their hands. Even Dick Cheney are now being shown in a new light to be somewhat credible. And I find that to be incredible that so many people are okay with this. Come on, Internet. Come on. No, we're not doing this on a Vice.com budget. Shockwave Flash Player may be busy or has stopped responding. You stop the plugin now. No, I don't want to stop the plugin now because I have a plugin I want to play. Internet. It's this computer. It's about to melt down on me. Anyway, speaking of propaganda ministers, Valerie Jarrett, who is one of the top aides, is a top advisor to President Barack Obama. And it shows you how isolated really he is, because when your top advisors are people like Valerie Jarrett, you're just not that connected. And she is probably at best a handler. Anyway, she went on the, one of these ridiculous shows, Pop Sugar. Please continue. Please let me play this freaking thing. But we'll just read from it here. Propaganda Minister Valerie Jarrett goes to Hollywood to get Obamacare in movies and TV scripts. I mean, this is overt propagandization of the people. And one of the things I really, really find so offensive is that now they're going to the sports arena. I've been watching some of the basketball games here, and I guess it's they're beyond 32. What is it? The Elite 16? What do they call it? You got the Final Four, you got the Elite 8, you got the Sweet 16. Shows you how much I keep up with it. But every other commercial is somebody telling you that you need to go to healthcare.gov and get on board. Now, it's funny because just last month, Catherine Sebelius, however you say her name, was talking about how they cannot push the deadline. They cannot push it. It's illegal to push the deadline. They cannot do it. It would be illegal and unconstitutional. It's against the law, basically, to push the enrollment date. And they've done it once again. They've done it once again. So kind of, eating a little crow there. But not that anybody's going to hold her accountable besides myself. Come on now. This thing is so irritating. Yes, reload the page. Why not? I was going to play Valerie Jarrett, basically admitting that they have to use propaganda to get people on board with Obamacare. And here's the deal. I need health care. I am in a personal situation where I need health care, just in case. Got some issues, just like most of you do, that you'd like to go to a doctor and get looked at for less than a small fortune. You hope that when you go to the doctor that you don't have something that's really bad, because God only knows if you're going to be covered. Go and spend $800 to get into an account with Obamacare, and then you find out you got cancer. Sorry, not covered. Sorry, pre-existing condition. Sorry. And now that we know, and now that the insurance company knows, you're totally screwed and you're not getting anything. So that's why I find it on a personal level, I'm sure some of you do as well, very, very frustrating, because you see all of these shills and they're really showing their faces. People like, comedians that I used to enjoy, Zach Galifianakis, Between Two Ferns, working with Obama to get you to get into it, and Steve Nash, basketball phenom, and you just can't escape the propaganda. And now, if you didn't need a great reason to pull out the shotgun and shoot your television, they're going to be selling you Obamacare in scripts, in movies. And that's her job. She's a propaganda minister. She could be advising Obama, but really she's an advisor to his best friend, maybe one of the few allies Obama still has, and that is the media, Hollywood. Are we going to do this thing? Oh, well, you don't need her to tell you that. She's already been pretty, straightforward with it. So disappointing. But, it gives you one more arrow in your arsenal to shoot at people that, constantly give an apologist point for the Affordable Health Care Act. And I know a lot of people that are getting a better deal, and if you are, I know that some people are getting better deals and getting better coverage. And if you are, consider yourself really, really, really lucky. All right, so a big story that's going around, TB, tuberculosis from cats. This is going to set the internet on fire. A teenager told last night of her heroic ordeal of catching TB from her pet kitten. Now, this is from the Daily Mail. Okay, now I want to just reread this sentence because this is how the article starts, and it made me scratch my head. A teenager told last night of her heroic ordeal of catching TB from her pet kitten. I don't know what's heroic about it. Now, I think that maybe they messed up and it was supposed to be horrific, but heroic is a lot different. In what is believed to be the first case of its kind in the world, Jessica Livings was struck down with pneumonia and had to go to an emergency surgery. She had TB, goes on here. She had lung damage. She was rushed to the hospital. And, TB from kitty cats, amongst other things you can get from them, like toxoplasmosis, raises, I think, a lot of fears. Because some of you people, especially the internet, 50% of it's just pictures of kitty cats and people fawning over their cats and loving their cats to the point where, you can have the grumpy cat come to South by Southwest, and people will line up. People will line up not just a few hundred or a few thousand. I'm talking about over 10,000 people waiting upwards of 10 hours to take a picture to pet the grumpy cat. If you're not familiar with Grumpy Cat, just put it into your search engine. You'll find more pictures of Grumpy Cat or imposters or people pretending to be Grumpy Cat or dressing up like Grumpy Cat than you can imagine. And I think it's indicative of a society that is so infatuated with cute. Why talk about real things when we can just look at things that are so cute? Oh my God, it's a kitten. It makes me happy. Well, anyway, those people are going to be the ones that are the most affected by this. Toxoplasmosis is breaking the blood barrier or blood-brain barrier, and now getting into warm water mammals. If you're not familiar with toxoplasmosis, a good chance you may have it. Good chance I may have it. 80% of the people in Brazil have toxoplasmosis, and it's a parasite that eats your brain and makes you mad. Meet crazy, mad people. Well, I don't meet them, but I talk to them from time to time here and there, and I always wonder, do you have toxoplasmosis? Or are you just really mad? So it brings up the specter of and fear, I think, of not being protected. And I wonder why all of these stories that have been around for a while, like being able to contract TB from animals and toxoplasmosis, it seems that only with this huge propaganda push are these stories becoming even, getting the circulation that they probably already deserved. Because, the obvious solution is you need healthcare.gov, because you never know when your kitty cat's going to give you TB. I mean, one of the many reasons to do that. I do want to step back just for a moment and talk about the Ukraine and Russia. Sorry for the confusion here and the non sequitur, but I'm having some computer problems. This is worse than, healthcare.gov, it seems. Anyway, one of the things that Obama was saying, besides the common sense, that the reason that we didn't just blow the crap out of Syria is because, there's no political solution. That's the exact same. He's channeling Dick Cheney back in 2000. No, it was actually in 1990, I want to say 6 or 7, where he made the comparison, or basically said the same thing, with why we didn't invade Iraq initially. Or why we initially used targeted strikes and we didn't try to overthrow the government. And we did later because we thought it was more important. But the first time was because there's no political solution. Okay, you could blow the crap out of the country, and then what? Well, what happens when you destroy the infrastructure? You might have blown the country up. You might have maybe dethroned or disempowered the dictator, but you have to have something to follow up with. You have to have some kind of plan B. You have to do something to try to bring about stability, and you have to have a new coalition government ready to go. Now, they did the second time they hit Iraq, but we're seeing the fruits of that. When I see, Condoleezza Rice being, loved and hailed as this, big thinker wonk, I just think about how wrong she was. If she's this great person like everyone makes her out to be, then she's just so wrong. And how much blood is on her hands because of bad decisions that they made during the Bush doctrine. Well, anyway, one of the things he said was that the world is uniting against Russia. The world. And I thought, well, that's not quite true, Barack Obama. The world is not uniting against Russia. The Western world, the G7, may be uniting in voice only. Oh, yeah, everybody's going to say that it's bad, bad, bad. We hate Russia. Oh, yeah, those are the bad guys. Vladimir Putin is crazy. But the Swiss have decided against Russian sanctions. The Indians have decided against penalizing Russia. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, are all in consensus as to what has happened. And most importantly, Russia and China are in agreement that what was done in the Crimea and the annexing and the I guess, faux election. I mean, and I'm going to say this over and over again. There's just too much Putin worship going on. We actually published an article about Stop the Putin Worship. People got really upset. Anthony McGillis, a guy who writes out of, I think he lives in Amsterdam. He's Dutch. But he basically said, look, the same oligarchs, the same people that have empowered and gendered Putin, that have become even more powerful and more rich, are some of the same exact Rothschild bankers and oligarchs that were there from yesteryear. I mean, it's Bolshevism 2.0. So don't get too excited. Don't put this guy at hero status. And ironically, most of the people that have become kind of anti-Semitic, that's become a huge push and a political platform, and has been for quite a while in Russia, in Ukraine, in the Eastern Bloc. Those are the same exact Jewish bankers that are bankrolling Putin. So before you get too excited about who Putin is and what he's doing and becoming a Putinist, we joked about on Doomcast 34, the Putin nanny, start looking at, who he has behind him. And those, not that, that really diminishes anything, but the people that get so excited about Putin because, he's doing things that they see as being anti-establishment or anti-West. He's got his own group of backers that you would probably find just as distasteful, including the Rothschild banking dynasty that love Putin, that love the investing in Russia, and so that's not going to stop. Now, in spirit, I guess that's one way to put it. In spirit, people are saying, "Well, Russia, bad, bad, bad," but at the end of the day, I mean, they're getting huge, huge support. One of the things you could tell that is scaring the shit out of John Kerry and the rest of the Obamanites is that China is looking to become the world power that the U.S. supposedly is. And they're looking to have the world's reserve currency through the yuan, renminbi, or other currencies, or maybe even the ruble. They would like that distinction. And Russia is already, golf clapping for this. This is the end of the dollar, the death of the dollar. This is the isolation. This is the polarization of the world. And it's good for Russia. Ultimately, it probably won't be good for anyone other than those, including myself, that do want to see deglobalization rather than more globalization. When you have everybody that's doing whatever they want at the disinterest of their own people because there's international money and cash, that's a problem. When you have no actors in the global spectrum that are at odds with the U.S., with the UN, with the global government, it gets to the point where there's just almost no representation for the people at all. At least when you have a little bit of a fight, people have to give you. There's a little competition. You have to get the best deal, and that's what the U.S. is trying to do. And all of these different sanctions have become, I think, kind of laughable. So if you've been watching the talking heads on your television, the U.S. is standing tall and they're showing Putin. But at the end of the day, most of the people that are supposed to be on board with the U.S. are still double dealing and double dipping with the Russians. Case in point, the Swiss. It's out of the local. The position of our country is independent of the UN. Thank God. Golf clap. Yay! Swiss President Dietler Burkhalter, maybe, told a press conference in Bern saying Switzerland can only use sanctions when they are based upon, quote, international law and the interests of the Swiss. Now, I like this because he's basically saying that what Vladimir Putin did is not against international law, and that's become the big debate. Was this legitimate? We don't think it's legitimate. John Kerry doesn't think that this was in consensus with international law. And, well, the Swiss, which are pretty good arbiters of what's international law and what's not, are saying, we'll still work with the Russians. No point in this. Which is, very, very advantageous to the Fortune 500 companies that still want to do business in Russia. I mean, PepsiCo, they want to do business. They've got billions of dollars over there at Coke from the Russian people. They love it. They have KFC over there. They have a lot of Western companies. I mean, McDonald's stands to lose maybe even billions of dollars if you get rid of, you start annexing sanctioning the Russian government. So it's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of excitement for those neocons because they see the opportunity to use this as a political platform. And they're doing it. That's why they got Condi out there and the rest of the gang, and Dick Cheney's becoming relevant once again. And I was watching Max Kaiser, and regardless of what you think of him, I think that he's kind of a loudmouth. And honestly, I'll just say this: I think it's pretty funny. He used to be a Bitcoin advocate. Now he has his own coin, the Max coin. So half of his blog is dedicated to telling you why you should be buying into his own virtual currency, which is kind of self-serving. But he was saying that basically we had the faux war on terror, the fake war on terror, to have a 10-year decade doctrine for war, and that now we have a faux Cold War, bringing back this Cold War. And I thought it was interesting because he's on RT, and he probably does have some insight into what's really happening on that front. And I would be in agreement saying that I think that most of this is scripted. I think that what we see is a lot of BS, and this is redrawing the international order, and it is bringing people back to the table to talk about global government and why it's necessary. And he said it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think that there might be a lot more to this, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least to find out that ultimately, at the end of the day, that this is part of a grander plot to change the global discussion. So take it for what it is, and take Max Kaiser at his word. But it does seem that, if you look at most of the things, the original Cold War, now moving forward into the war of terror and the war of radicalism and extremism, it's kind of run its course. And so now, people are no longer buying into, let's blow up Syria because we love the children. You just can't get that to pass muster anymore. So why not have a global tension with Russia in this new world order? And that's what's coming out of this. Countries that are aligning alongside the BRICS and countries that are aligning alongside the West. And at the end of the day, the people are ultimately, as always, going to pay the price. Just ask those Ukrainians how they like those new gas bills and their new debt serfdom to the IMF. See how many of those right-wing radicals are still clamoring to join the EU when this is all said and done. 6 months from now, what kind of political punditry and football the Ukraine ends up being. All right, so I want to thank all of you for listening to this podcast, all of the people in the chat room, hanging out at blacklistedradio.com that make this lively and always keep me on my toes. I want to thank, personally, Jay Jink, good friend of mine in the chat room, always a great moderator and ambassador of the show, and all of those that continue to support us. You can do that at blacklistedradio.com. Your financial contributions to this show allow it to be completely independent. We don't sell you to advertisers. That's the most important thing. Regardless of how great the show is, if they're selling you to an advertiser, if it's goldsilver.com, I'm an affiliate. I think that they give you a great price, but you're being shopped. Your audience is being shopped to those people, so you become the product. You're the product, not me, not the show, not the information. That's a problem. So we need independent media, and until we get off of that old system where the corporate sponsors give money to the talking head so that they can get their profit from your listeners, until we get away from that, you're just not going to have anything that's really, truly independent. So if you find value in the show, please support it, not only with your financial contributions, but with your word. You can also go to blacklistednews.com to get your daily fix of news from the despotic land known as the United States of America. Follow us on Twitter. If you want the latest, you can go to Spreaker.com. Just look for my name, Doug Owen, or just put me into the search engine, Blacklisted Radio in the search engine. You'll find a plethora of shows. Also, you can follow us on YouTube, our YouTube channel, /Blacklisted News. I'll be back next Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, take care.